Well, welcome to week 3 of the Culture Couch Live. So, boys, Em, Woz, and Jez, how are you guys?
Very good, Rosie.
Yeah, lack of enthusiasm. Well done. I hope we ramp it up a bit more than that. That was shocking. Anyway, let's go to the first. I'm actually going to combine 2 questions because we've got questions that are sort of similar but slightly different. But I think it's worth. The first question from Lester: can you change culture from the bottom up? And then from Laurie, what do you do if your boss is old school? So Murph, I might sort of head to you first. I mean, they are a little bit similar, but potentially slightly different. So pick up on one of those, and yeah, what's the feedback on those?
Well, if we're going to talk old school, Rosie, I thought we'd probably throw back to you. How do we do?
I'm a new age leader, you know that.
We better start again, I think.
No, we can keep going. Yeah, don't be shy.
Okay. So in terms of old school, what do we mean by old school? I think that's a really interesting question because old school might just mean hard and fair, but it might mean that they're not prepared to change. So I think in order for any program to be successful, in my experience, the leader has to buy into it.
Yeah.
So if the program is incongruent with the leader's style, then I think what you'll find is it'll be very difficult to get any cultural change. So whether it's old school or new school, it doesn't matter. The leader has to be prepared to buy into it. I'm not sure if you would agree with that.
Yeah, I think it's a good question, but maybe I'll flip to the other one, boys, and go to Em and then what. So let's say, if we say the next question, can you change culture from the bottom up? What about in a bigger company? Because I think you're right, hands down, Murph. But if we sort of said, I mean, some of a really big company, you've got the old school, top-down approach. Is it possible to get a group within that big company to work on their culture independently? Woz, I might throw to you first.
So you're going to have a challenge. Like the reality, I've seen this happen before with myself and it's not necessarily, so a big company where, say, our office in that geographic location has an amazing culture, but the other office does not. And that generally comes down to probably the original question. And that's the fact is the leader in that particular location or the other location willing to change. I think ultimately being able to implement the culture in one location and showcase, because it's very easy to see culture that's high performing from the outside in, because ultimately if you're on meetings with the teams in the other department or other geographic location, you can just see the way that they can communicate with each other in a much better way. There's banter, there's laugh, but there's real talk, there's direct communication on something when you need an answer, and you can tell that it's not controversial. You're just trying to get the outcome. And from when someone sort of turns up to those meetings and sees the culture in that department or that geographic location being so well, you start to get questions as to, wow, what are you doing? How are you implementing that? What does that look like? How can we adapt to that? And then it comes back to that sort of leadership question is the leader in the other location willing to take that change and implement that change to get that outcome? But it can be done. It just has to be probably a holistic department, and that department has to be considered a very crucial part of the business.
Yeah, I was going to say the same. Was you can do it within departments, Ruzi, but then you go up the next level, and if the leader at the next level isn't prepared to adopt that change, then it just stops there. Yeah. And so you can never really become company-wide transformation. So absolutely you can do it within certain areas, but it's really hard for it to spread past those areas. Unless of course you build such great weight of numbers that everyone goes, hey, wow, this is so cool, we should be doing it. And then all of a sudden, you get this, it's like a ripple effect. It's sort of off it goes. But that would be the exception rather than the rule if you've got people at the top that don't want to change.
Yeah, it's a good point. And if I get back to Laurie and Lester's question, and let's because I agree with both of you, obviously, but Emile, let's say that has happened. So we've got this really good groundswell within a department.
Yeah.
To Waz's point, you know, the CEO's seen that. To Murph's point, looked at it and gone, wow, this is pretty cool. Is it sometimes a case of you just don't know what you don't know? So that CEO has been indoctrinated in this old school mentality for so long that that's just the way he does it.
Yeah.
The flip side is if he does decide to change, it can be incredibly powerful. Can't it, for the whole company?
Absolutely, 100%. And I agree with Waz. It's happened to me a few times, even with you, Waz, in our experience working together, what you were doing in Australia and in India, moved and transferred into the Boston office. And but yeah, it does. When the primary center of influences make that change, the shift is quite remarkable. It happens almost instantaneously, and it's quite a moment, and it's wonderful to watch. But it does, Jez's point's right, it's that weight of numbers, like that law of diffusion, that there's so many people now living a bit of a different way that everyone says, well, it's working, we're more direct, we're getting more stuff done, and generally productivity and happiness goes up. So, and the leaders go, well, that's good, why don't we just do more of that?
So, Ruzi, can I just chuck to you, in your experience, you played a lot of games of football under a lot of coaches, I'm not sure how many, but did you ever see a coach actually change the way they led on the basis of they thought it would be better for the team?
Yeah, I think so. But I guess what we talk about is under pressure, isn't it? I think we typically see change when things are going really well, don't we? And then all of a sudden, in the footy sense, Murphy, you've probably seen it more than me. Suddenly you have a 2 or 3 losses in a row and the coach goes, oh, no, I'm taking it back. And, you know, I'm taking it away from the players. It's the biggest mistake they can make, isn't it, really? Yeah, because in footy, you know, you're going to win some, you're going to lose some. But, you know, as we know, over the course of time, the more empowering you are to your playing group, the better you're going to be. And I think that's proven time and time again over the last sort of 15 years in AFL football. But it is under pressure, Murph, isn't it, when they tend to pull the cards back into their chest and take everything back.
And I think that's why it's so hard to make changes, because as you say, whether it's sport or whether it's corporate, when the pressure comes on, when the budgets get tight, you know, when you've got really tight deadlines, are you able to empower and trust the group instead of bringing it back in? And it is hard, particularly under pressure.
I remember when, you know, one of your quotes, I think it might have been, it's either you, Jez, or Ruzi, that always sticks with me, which I share a lot, is when under pressure, trust more. And it's completely counterintuitive. And I know I can actually think of moments back in the day with Aussie X when that came about, where traditionally I would step in as the person who had the experience in the schools, and I would just jump in and sort of try and fix it quite quickly because I had that experience. And the times that I didn't, under your tutelage and mentorship, Jez, were the biggest growth periods for guys like Connor and that. And it's crazy how I can think back at those moments and go, nah, just trust more, and how, it went against every ounce of my being. But when I did it, it was the best thing that I could have done in that moment, right?
It undermines the group and completely if you go and jump in. But also, you know, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right? So by enabling the team to take, you know, something that is high pressure and navigate through the solution themselves just makes them a better individual contributor there going forward. And so it's important to step back and give guidance where it's needed, but let the team take the responsibility of getting stuff done.
Yeah. And one more thing about that, it was an interesting thing I was caught on, the way that Jeff Bezos makes decisions, and he has this sort of grid, and one of the axes is irreversibility. So if the decision cannot be like reversed, that's when he steps in. But if it sways a bit to the other side and it's not going to destroy everything, he lets the person in charge make the decision. So I think it also comes down to the impact of the decision, right? And what that's going to do to the wider team and the health of the organization. So there's also got to be, how big is that decision that you're letting them make and continue to do, you know? So there's that part of it as well, which makes it, again, just that little bit more complex.
And it's a great lead into the next question, I guess. This is from Michael. Can you give us some traits of good leaders? And I guess it's sort of opportune on the back of the Culture Couch, Murph, we've been doing, is it? Because there's some really consistent messages and some really good messages that have come through, you know, the CEOs, the sports people, of consistent traits that we see in good leaders. So maybe you want to kick off on that one too, Murph.
Yeah, I think the one that I've really enjoyed and have taken it on board a lot, both from a personal perspective and working with teams, is inclusivity. So we've always been about creating safe environments and being inclusive. But I think listening to the leaders speak on the Culture Couch, and particularly Michael Schneider from Bunnings, like his commitment to creating an inclusive environment, regardless of which team in the organisation, was just, it's fantastic to listen to. So I think inclusivity and consistency, they just keep coming out all the time. People want their leaders to be consistent. Like when they turn up, they want to know what they're going to get. And in some ways, I think even a bad leader who's consistent is better than an inconsistent person because at least you know what you're going to get, don't you? Like you turn up, yep, I know what he or she's going to be today. Like here we go again. But at least you know what you're going to get and you can deal with it.
Yeah. Because then you can work around it, can't you? Because you know if it's consistently, even if it's consistently wrong, you work a way around it. You've been really honest about your leadership style. So maybe a really direct question: when you first started as a leader, what were your traits then? And now that you've transformed, significantly over, what do you think your biggest changes to those traits are, and where would they sit now?
Yeah, I think, ultimately, it comes back to probably my profile. Obviously, I want to do things now. I'm an eagle, but I'm very analytical. So I do like to process things and understand them at a very rich level. And when you understand things at a rich level and you become quite experienced in it, you just take over and just do everything on behalf of everybody else. And that was my weakness, is when things go wrong, get in there, sit in the seat, do it myself. It's just easier. Now I think my biggest thing and learning, I think, probably is from yourself, Ruzi, and I'd say the biggest trait of a leader is to ask more questions. Simple as that. If you don't have the full context of what's going on, you don't understand why things are the way they are, you jump to conclusions. You also don't gather how that person's feeling. You don't gather enough data. Sure, you can answer questions, but generally, if you ask enough questions, the answer will come out from the answers of the person themselves. So I think that for me now is I just let the people find the answer by asking more questions. Simple as that.
Yeah, fantastic. Em, I think one of your strengths, Em, is really on the relationship piece. I mean, you're really good at sort of setting up meetings with things like gratitude and so forth, sort of thing. So how important is that for a leader to build really strong relationships?
Yeah, when that question came up, I wrote down facilitator. Actually, I think good leaders are facilitators now of conversations, because at the end of the day, a bit like Michael Schneider, he shared a really good story about when COVID hit. The ground level staff, they had a channel of communication from the people in the big green sheds directly up to the executives. And he said a good story that most of the solutions to manage COVID actually came from the team, not from the war room, as he said, not the executive team. And that was because of that value of inclusivity running through the scaled inclusivity, which is quite incredible for a 55,000 team organization. And so when I think about that, they've been able to facilitate the right conversations to get the information from the people that actually know exactly what's going on, because they're at the ground level, even though it's a giant company with many, many layers. So I think of great leadership in the modern era of people that can actually come into a meeting and facilitate the conversation, as you say, ask questions, and end up being the person that almost grabs all the patterns and speaks last, and grabs all the little pieces of information, then grabs those patterns and then can make the best decisions. But ultimately they're actually facilitating the meetings as opposed to, doing most of the talking per se. So yeah, that's the thing that I've noticed.
That was one of the things that made Bomber Thompson such a great coach, I reckon. Like Bomber would literally, is a quiet person, he would literally just get the boys to speak, and then at the end of it, he'd just go bang. Okay, that's what we're going to do. This is the point. I think it's probably an interesting question for you, Rizzy. Did your leadership style change between Sydney and Melbourne? And did you have to become a different leader?
Very good question.
I think one of the big things, Murph, is self-awareness. And the reason I say that in answer to your questions is if you really know where you are as a person and also where your company is. So it's not only self-awareness, but it's awareness of people around you. I think that's a huge part of it. So clearly, at Sydney, I played with the players. I knew them. They knew me. So I didn't really have to build relationships because I already had relationships. So then bang, it was straight into coaching. So this is the way we want to coach. At Melbourne, the first thing I had to do was build those relationships, and then also at that particular time, I had a really good group of people around me, my assistant coaches had all come from Sydney. So that awareness of, no, you don't have to do this, this and this. I'll let Benny Matthews and George Stone and Daniel McPherson and Brad Ellison. What I need to do now is work with the leadership group, work with the medical team, all that sort of stuff. So I think self-awareness for a leader is, and was you touched on it, for yourself. I think, and if I look at was, as a CEO of Market One and MediFarm Lab now, I mean, your self-awareness, mate, compared to when I first met you is so dramatically different. And I think it's made you an incredible leader. And that's one of the big things that I think.
Yeah, okay. I agree with it, because I think where it becomes really difficult when you're facilitating team sessions, is that when you get a leader that gets feedback and the leader has no idea that feedback's coming. Like they are the most difficult sessions, and that's that lack of self-awareness, because to be honest, they've got no idea what's about to hit them because they're not aware, and often they don't want the feedback.
Yeah.
So again, that's that self-awareness. I'm interested in Ruzi's point for you was, so you must have been coming off a low base, were you?
My self-awareness. 100%. I mean, like I said that in the week one video. It's like, not understanding profiles. I think, as I said, like I've been coming back to the original question before around profiles, but more so about leadership itself. It's just like, if you don't understand that there's different types of profiles that react to different behaviors, even yourself and how you react to different scenarios, you've got no hope. But most people get into those situations of leadership because they're a good individual performer, not because they understand how to lead. And that's the biggest weakness today. You don't go and look at a person's skill set on culture and performance. But probably for me, when I interview now, everyone says it's the strangest interview I've ever had in my entire life, because I ask nothing about what the person does in terms of skill set. I just want to know who they are and what energies do they lean on in different scenarios. And I hire people based on that, because you can train most people to do anything. You can't train people to be a good human. Simple as that. Well, it's harder to train people to be good people.
Yeah, it is.
I just have to put my hand up there, boys. Sorry, and apologise for using humour to make a point, because we talk a lot to people about not doing that, and I just did it. So sorry, was.
We know each other well enough to do that, Jared. So I'm comfortable with that. Appreciate that.
But I also think it's a great point. It's a great point, Mert, because what we would say is right time, right place.
That's right.
If we're actually giving feedback to ourselves and we're trying to give a message here, so it's right time, right place. That's a really good.
Yeah, it's not too bad.
Comment in the context of what we're talking about leadership, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%.
Righto, boys, fantastic. I reckon, just to summarise it, in answer to the first two questions, it is going to be difficult, isn't it, if you haven't got those traits that we spoke about? So they're really sort of three good questions that really loop back around, isn't it? Because if you haven't got those traits as a really good leader, then it is going to be really difficult to control the culture from the bottom up. And it is going to be hard to deal with that old school leader. But look, I would say don't give up. Really give it a go. Get someone in there. Make sure you're driving a high performing culture, no matter what we are. Because we also talk about you don't necessarily have a title to be a leader. So be a leader, and then as silly as it sounds, you can always leave the company, can't you? You can always make the decision if it's not the right company for you, and we see that all the time. So boys, great messages. Thanks a lot. Well done, was Good work, Merv. No more humour from you. See you later.
Thanks,
No more
guys.